authors, filmmakers, entertainment, and all your listening needs. Listen now to Talk Now Radio, where no topic is taboo.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talk Now Radio. This is your host, Royce the Redneck Radio Man. And joining me tonight is going to be Devrah Laval. And we're going to be discussing her newest book, A Leap to Freedom, that she gets involved in a lot of the guilt that we have and we're hanging on to that keeps us separate, that we really don't need to be hanging on to. So we're going to be talking about quantum guilt answers, or the healing quantum guilt answers, as she likes to put them in her intro over here, that will help give us all a lot of freedom from a lot of the emotional baggage that we carry each day. And I'm going to let her tell us a little more about that and correct any errors I made in what I was saying. But real quick, I want to remind everybody, if you want to learn more about her, go to her website, www.DevrahLaval, DevrahLaval.com. And she has all her information in there on a nice big site. It's a lovely site. I've been to it, and I think y'all will enjoy it. I had it right in front of me just a minute ago. She's got counseling. She's got information on her book, free reading, newsletters, resources, a place to contact her. She has an area there she calls the Magic Doorway. She can probably tell us a little more about what that's about since I'm not sure. But she's got plenty there to keep y'all's attention when you're there. And if y'all want to call in and ask questions, the number is 832-632-7904. If you're not listening at the site, if you want to join us live and chat, it's www.talknowradio.com. The player's up close to the top of the page where it's easy to find. Come on in and hop in, and you do need a free membership to get in the chat, and it's there to keep the spam bots out. But like I say, we don't charge anything for it, so feel free to come join us. Deborah, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Royce. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank you for coming to my show. It's a pleasure to meet you. I know this is the first time I remember having you, but I've really been looking forward to it.
Likewise, yeah. I'm glad we got our time straight.
Yeah, that happens quite a bit doing what I do, especially with some people overseas, and sometimes a time zone can actually move depending on daylight saving times. It can get kind of funny. So that does happen quite a bit, and I just kind of learned to try to work around it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do know.
So did I say anything correct or incorrect about the book there while I was introducing you?
No, the book that I've written that is now being launched is called Leap to Freedom, Healing Quantum Guilt. And it's a very different kind of book. People who have read it have had actual leaps to freedom. So that's what it's all about. Is that guilt is the ultimate separator from our divine source.
Okay.
Go ahead. And I think, though, I should tell you a little bit about how I got onto this guilt business.
I was just fixing to say that when I almost walked all over you there and interrupted you. It was to tell you, why don't you tell us a little something about yourself and what led you into the book, and you just come right up behind it.
Okay, well, I guess we're synchronized.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Yeah, well, it happened for me during a meditation retreat at the age of 29. And in this meditation retreat, I had what is called a direct experience of the truth, or enlightenment of who and what I really am. And this was the most profound moment I had ever experienced up until that point. And what I experienced was an absolute love, a love that went far beyond the confines of this body-mind, pretty much beyond anything that I'd ever experienced prior to that. And a miraculous healing soon followed this experience. An organ in my body actually grew back that had dissolved prior to this meditation retreat. So that was quite remarkable. And in this experience, I saw that there was no guilt. There was only love. And this enlightenment experience was so profound that it literally changed my life forever. And then I began to study with masters and gurus and teachers in order to deepen and integrate this experience. And then people began to gravitate to me, and I naturally just started working with people. But the effect of this awakening changed my life so completely that everything I assumed to be true and real seemed to dissolve. So it's almost like everything I thought was normal and real became the opposite. It wasn't normal and real. It was the other way around, which is what this book, the second book, is all about. And the thing that I find most important from all of these experiences, well, I had many experiences over the years after this experience, but the thing that I found most interesting was that the fact that I realized that I am one with the source of all life. And that was the main crux of the whole thing. I'm one with the source of all life. And this guilt that I came across is the absolute separator of that. And that's why I came up with this quantum guilt. It's like the core guilt. It's the guilt that goes beyond everything.
Kind of sort of like original sin guilt.
Yeah, it is the original sin guilt, if you want to call it that, although according to what I've studied and what I've understood and experienced, there's no original sin, but exactly right.
Yeah, I'm familiar with what you're talking about. I use that because it was an expression that seemed to blend with what you were saying there, in other words. Seemed like it was along the same line principle-wise. But I do know that I am familiar with that, and I can tell you I've heard preachers get in the pulpit, because I used to be a Sunday school teacher. My dad was a preacher. I'm into the spiritual path now. Got away from religion. But while I was there, what I did notice is a lot of preachers would get up there, and they would talk about there is no separation from God. However, this would really be said without knowing the true depth of what that meant. It was more like a metaphor to them than... Well, ma'am, I do apologize for that. I can't help that. I got emphysema, and it hit me before I could get to the mute button. But what I was going to say is it's not like it had a reality to them, in other words. But, you know, even Jesus himself did say, I and my Father am one. And isn't that the real scriptural teaching, that we are all at one with the source?
Yes, it's the scriptural teaching in the Bible, but it's the scriptural teaching in every other religion, in the esoteric religions as well. So it's quite interesting, and this is where I did my research. I really wanted to delve more deeply into this ego separation from source or original sin, because many people had come to me for spiritual counseling after that enlightenment experience regularly, and they displayed that painful separation of the guilt and grief and unworthiness, all of them, pretty much, in their lives. And go ahead, Roy. Yeah.
No, I was just going to ask you, though, this here sin nature that most, guilt thing that most people feel, does it something that occurs during childhood, say sometimes laid on by fellow students, sometimes from teachers, sometimes parents and religious leaders, and a whole conglomerate of well-meaning people that don't know the damage they're doing?
Yes, it's true. But that is the symptom. More, the cause is what I deal with in the book, the core. The symptom is all the ways we treat each other. You know, I looked at this quantum, I made up the name quantum because quantum is the smallest amount possible, and yet it's our largest problem. And as I mentioned before, I discovered that the guilt is the greatest separator there is from love, truth, and enlightenment. And when we've already separated from our love, from our truth, from our sense of who we really are, what we do with that is we project and are put onto others all these negative qualities that we feel in ourselves. And that's why the preachers or the kids at school or teachers or anyone for that matter, that's why they do this kind of thing to each other. This is why they project this onto each other, because of this core guilt that they're feeling in themselves. And one of the things that I did is I started to look at the neurotic feelings of guilt to begin with. I discovered, though, that this is a much larger problem. I looked at the existential guilt and the psychological guilt and the basic guilt that we throw around all the time at that level. But really, it's a much larger problem. It's not just the guilt of, I did something wrong, or I shouldn't have, I should have done this, I shouldn't have done that. It's much larger. And what I saw is that the guilt not what we think it is, it all stems from the quantum guilt. And the guilt that I speak of in my book runs our whole life and is based on the wrong belief that we have separated from our true and divine self. So what it is really is that we believe that we've separated from our source. We really believe that we've done something terribly wrong and that we deserve to be punished. And so what we do is punish ourselves and each other at the same time, which is why we have war and why we have violence and everything else. It's not because of actions. It's because the guilt was there before the actions even happened.
Wow.
Yeah.
And this is something that's really deeply rooted from early on then. And what do you recommend that people do to overcome this?
Well, there's really anything this is really true yoga. This is the absolute true yoga, in that yoga is union, and anything apart from that is separation. So it's very simple. But we want to return to our oneness, because when we're separate from our oneness, we're in this unconscious or quantum guilt. When we're one with ourselves, we're in a whole different place where we see through divine eyes. We see each other from a place of love rather than a place of separation and guilt and unworthiness and everything else. So everything that we see in our world is us. And that's the real core. It's the belief that we separated from ourselves. And so the antidote to that is beginning to see our oneness. And it's hard to do because we're so convinced that we're separate from another. You look at another, and there's a body over there. It's like the Course in Miracles says that if you see each other as a body only, you're only going to see sin in each other. Sin and separation. But if we see each other as something much larger than just the body, mind, which we are, anything that is impermanent, how can we see it as the truth? Because it's impermanent. So anytime we just look at another's body, their accomplishments, their health, their this or that, we're not seeing them. We're seeing their separation. We're not seeing the love in each other. And even the fact that we could create, such violence or war in our world it's almost like a kindergarten in a way. People have not touched that oneness in themselves, have not seen each other as one at all, that they could think that was okay somehow.
Okay, so how do you, though, if you're looking at somebody that you know is a known rapist, or you might have just saw him commit a rape or a murder or some hideous crime or something, how do you bring yourself to look beyond that and look at them as being one with you and with the Creator?
Well, in a situation like that, someone is in deep separation. That means they're deeply removed from love. And often when people go into the lives of these people after they've been caught for their crime, some of them have had horrendous childhoods. And they've been so deeply separated from love, it's like they have no sense of what's correct.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to step on you there.
Oh, no, go ahead, yeah.
I was just going to say, though, you think it's important then for people to remember that things are not always as they seem, that this individual is probably coming from his own hurt and mirroring it into the world?
Absolutely. They're deeply wounded, they're deeply hurt, and they're deeply separate from their source. And this is why I was saying earlier, separation is the cause of all evil. This core separation, the belief that we're not one. Because if you were one, you couldn't do that to another. If you were one, you couldn't hurt another. You could see you are one. They are still one, but they have no consciousness of that. If you have the consciousness of that, that's why most of us don't do that, because we have some sense of others being part of us somehow.
Now, where do you think that this guilt and this separation, or should I say perceived separation, where do you think it has its origins at?
This perceived separation, well, I talk about the Big Bang in my book and where everything originated from. And the scientists and the saints seem to come together on some of this stuff. And what they talk about is that at the beginning of time, there was as you know, Big Bang, and this infinitely hot singularity, the smallest possible light arose and dissolved at the same time. So in a way, it actually didn't happen. It really didn't happen. In fact, we never separated. We never actually arose as what we think we are now. And it's quite interesting because all of the scientists claim the fact that we are one and we have never separated from Source at all.
You know, the Apostle Paul said something in the New Testament about seeing yourself as looking darkly through a glass, which is reminiscent to me of what you're talking about now.
Yeah.
Kind of like descriptive of what you're trying to say. So it's kind of like what we really see is a shadow or a mirror or a image of
or a
ourselves.
hologram. Yeah.
In flesh, but it's not really real, in other words.
That's right, yeah. That's exactly it.
I believe the Gnostics kind of describe this story with the story of Yah the Boeth, don't they? Or are you familiar with that?
Oh, say that again, Roy.
The Gnostics, they tell the story of the world's creator, the God that's in charge of this world now.
Oh, right, yeah.
Okay, you're familiar with that story?
Yeah.
That sounds kind of like what you're describing now. Would they be pretty close to the same thing?
Yes, it is, because, well, it's also that anyone that's had a near-death experience, anyone that's had an enlightenment experiences the same thing. There's only one thing to experience, that we're already one with the Source, and we've never left. And now science is backing us up. We've got David Bohm, he's a scientist, and he says, you're not merely made of the same thing, you are the same thing, one thing unbroken. So it's there. The separation seems real, but it's not, because we can find our way through having these kinds of experiences, beginning to see each other as divine, and recognizing that, yes, it's all one substance. We've never really done anything wrong. We're just one thing. In fact, some of the scientists are even saying today how cause and effect, which is, it all ties into guilt. So it's kind of the Eastern version of guilt, if you know what karma, in a sense.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you again.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
But I was just going to ask, have you ever read the Kabbalion by the Three Initiates?
No, tell me the story. I'm curious.
Well, it's not really per se a story so much as it is a description of God according to Hermeticism, or at least their interpretation of it. But it describes God as being mental, and that He is the universe, and we are Him, and it's all a mental, kind of like a dream state, and there is no reality in this. All of creation is not a reality. In other words, it's all like a mental dream of God, so to speak.
Right. Yeah, I'm totally in line with that. That's exactly what I'm saying from this angle. That when you see the truth, you recognize that it's an illusion. You recognize that everything that we thought, that was what I started my book with, is a dream, where I felt in the dream I had killed somebody. And it wasn't intentional. And I was fighting with them. I don't know. It could have been another lifetime. I could have been a man. But I had big boots on, and I was fighting with them, and I kicked them into a pool of water. And then they started to drown, and I tried to pull them out. I tried to save their life, but they were too heavy, and I couldn't get them out. And something happened that was very interesting after that, is that I remember going to bed after having had this dream, but waking up, and I was still in the dream. Nothing had changed. I was still in that dream, and yet I was in my apartment as a normal person. And here I was thinking, what happened? Why am I still in this dream? And time dissolved. And everything just became very illusory. I walked around just trying to feel what was real in the room and grabbed my bathroom sink. Everything was dissolving as I was being shown, and I was then taken up to a much higher frequency where I was being shown that we really are, it's all illusion, and we really are divinely loved and forgiven at the absolute level. And that's the only thing that's true and real. Everything else is just a projection, just a mental, the way you described it, the mental out picturing from our idea of it. So for that reason, we're forgiven.
That kind of, to me though, it kind of begs the question of what's the purpose of this here illusionary reality that God is having, in other words?
Well, it's like any dream or any movie you go to. You go to the movie and you enjoy it. There's a good guy, there's a bad guy, there's the antagonist, the protagonist, and everyone has their part, and each part is important to the movie. So it's
kind of like an experience.
It's like an experience. So similarly, we're in an experience of that, of that kind. It's like a movie. Like we're in a movie, and it really what's required in that is for us to really get to that place where we understand this is a movie. It's okay. It's okay. We're divinely loved at all times. We're not wrong. We're not bad. And the next stage of that is that the scientists and the saints also say that it's all scripted. And one saint in particular says that Ramana Maharshi is a great Eastern saint, and he said, "The force that brought you here knows every action the body needs to take, and will see to it that it takes those actions." And that's a saint that's a high caliber, highly evolved saint. And so it's an interesting way to look at it, a way to begin to experience it, because if every action is actually divinely moved along, we can just rest there. We can just relax.
Okay.
But If we think we're the doers, and that's one of the greatest things with this guilt that becomes a problem, is if we think we're the doer of action, then we're condemning ourselves always to guilt and to suffering and to anger and frustration and everything else. But if we relax in that more surrendered place of something bigger than us is in control, then we'll be doing our actions. It's not like we're going to lie around doing nothing. We'll do the actions, but we'll be doing it from a place of peace, a place of knowing that something larger than us knows what our role is in the movie.
Okay. Now, we had a question from a listener that wants to know, why does karma seem more severe to other people? Which I don't think she meant to type it quite like that, but I think she meant to say is, why does karma seem more severe to some people than it does to other people?
Why do they have harder karma? Is that the question?
Or why does that seem like it's more severe? In other words, yeah.
Well, people are doing different things in the movie. You know, some people are learning very quickly. And then when you're learning very quickly, what happens is you've got a lot more lessons, or you've got a lot more to understand. And when you go through a lot, anyone that's gone through a lot of things, whether they be physical things or financial things, spiritual things, they come out wiser. They come out more, evolved. And some people don't have a lot of karma, and that's just, they could be a young soul, or they could be just living through some part of this reality for some other reason. Everyone has a purpose, and everyone has a reason for doing what they're doing and becoming what they're becoming in this movie. So there's no right or wrong. I think we misuse things like karma to make people wrong, because I know, having been in spiritual groups for 30 years, that you hear people, oh, well, that's their karma. Rather than, I would take the word karma right off of everything and just simply being, that's just it. That's just how it is right now. That's their experience, and honoring their experience, knowing that we don't know the mystery of what lies behind people's experiences. And that's part of becoming more one with each other, is honoring what lies behind everyone's life and honoring the bigger power behind that.
And maybe the purpose behind any one given action, or behind all actions, even individually, is just simply the purpose of living.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
each one is each karma, each event, each thing you do is an experience of experiencing life. Maybe it's what it all boils down to. The end is each one has a set plan to live a certain part of life, because the more people that can live the more kind of lives, the more God can have coming in at one time.
Sure. I mean, it really is just experience. It's just, everything is for love. When we look at it, everything is for love. Everything's taking us back to love. Everything's taking us back to that place of love. And so whatever we go through is for that reason, whether it be good or bad. So it's really about taking all judgment off of everything that we experience and letting ourselves be thankful or non-judgmental about it. And that in
about
itself,
living and letting live.
Yeah, living and letting live, exactly. And I think that's one of the most important things that we can do in our world. If we're going to project anything onto this world, and when I say this world, I mean this world is actually our world. Each one of us has a world that we see. Because you can put 5 people in the room and everybody will see a different world. So that's exactly what it is. We all have a world that is uniquely ours. And so whatever we put into that world is what we experience. So why not put love into that world?